Good morning. It's Bernard Nomberg. I'm here with my buddy Whitney Seals. Whitney's an attorney here in Birmingham, and I appreciate you guys spending a few minutes with NOMBERG Law Live. As you know, we come to you every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Pacific time, and Whitney is going to talk to us about a very important topic. Good morning, Whitney, and I appreciate you joining us.
Glad to be here today.
Whitney has really developed a niche in the law, an area that's very important to any person who is concerned about their credit, who's concerned about their online presence, their identity, and the like. Anytime you apply for any type of a loan or file your tax returns, whatever it may be, Whitney has figured out the best ways strategy-wise. Whitney, again, I appreciate you spending a few minutes with us this morning. Give us a little bit of your background. You're here at Cochrun Seals.
Cochrun Seals. Mm-hmm. I am the Seals, and it sounds exciting when it's just Cochrun and me. So I take that for whatever it's worth. But we've had a good run over here. You mentioned the niche. I grew up in Ozark, Alabama, not far from Dothan. There you go, Lower Alabama. Married a girl from Homewood. She refused to move back to Ozark, so here we are. Yep. And law practice has been here for, I guess, 14 years. But I want to talk about the Fair Credit Reporting Act, part of the alphabet soup of consumer cases, FDCPA, TILA, whatever.
Sure.
Fair Credit Reporting Act was put in enacted by Congress around 1977 because credit reporting was really gearing up. Now, you mentioned how important credit reports are for lending, that kind of thing. I want to take it a step farther. Credit report determines if you get a job, a house, sometimes an education, transportation, which would lead to a job, etc. Yep. And so it's probably one of the most important documents that we as citizens have. Growing up, we used to joke around about if you got in trouble at school, it'd be on your permanent record. Well, there's no such thing as a permanent record except for credit reports. Those stick with you. And the problem that we see is that they are rife with errors. I encourage anybody that will listen, from the guy that sells me a cup of coffee to my parents, to please check your credit report every year. You'd be surprised at what mistakes are on there. And I'll give you a couple of real quick examples that we see all the time. The first is a mixed file. Let me explain. There may be a Bernard Nomberg in Avon, Colorado, who has terrible credit and has had cars repossessed and all kinds of terrible things happen.
I've heard of this guy.
Have you?
Yeah.
And if it winds up on your credit, guess what?
Yeah.
You're that man.
It's my problem.
It's your problem. And what we see so often, and this is unfortunate, is people don't find out they have these problems until they need credit. Mr. Seals, I was trying to get a loan. I was trying to refinance my house, and it says I have repossession, but I've never lived in Avon, Colorado. What do I do?
So it's by the time this rolls around, it's after all the bad has already happened, but you don't know anything about it until this time.
Right.
You're now trying to get your loan.
Yeah, and we're closing in 2 weeks. What do we do? Well, bad news. This is a process. It takes time. Mixed files are one. The other we see are a lot of different names, odd names associated with your credit, which can be disconcerting. If there's, if I'm Whitney Seals and there's Whitney spelled 15 different ways, and Seals spelled 15 different ways, I don't particularly like that. We also see debts that people do not owe. For example, if something was discharged in bankruptcy, it may still be showing up. Or a debt that was paid off that says it's still late and due and owing.
Sure.
All kinds of mistakes. Sure. Let me explain real briefly kind of how the industry works. There are three main credit reporting agencies: Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. All right. These companies gather data from people that you borrow money from. They send reports. Is Bernard paying on time? Is he paying the correct amount? Does he have credit with us? And all those get assembled onto a report for us, and then when you go to buy that fancy new Mercedes-Benz at the dealership, they mash a button, it pops up, and they can see, all right, what is he?
Your pay history.
Exactly. But the weird thing about the credit industry is we don't do business with them. We have no choice. You can't pick up the phone and say, TransUnion, I love you, don't issue any credit reports for me. Not going to happen. Their customers are not us. It is the lenders, the dealership I told you about, bank, that kind of thing. So it makes it a little different. We're captives of the credit reporting agencies.
Whitney, thank you for that background of information.
Lengthy background.
It just opens up a whole bunch of questions that I'm sure anybody who's listening and pays attention should be asking, such as, let's say that you hadn't paid a certain credit card on time for 2 or 3 months in a row, and you get that letter that it looks like a form letter from the credit card company, and they say, you're delinquent. You haven't paid us, I don't know, in 60 days.
Okay.
You're subject to potentially having this being reported. How important are those letters?
Those letters are incredibly important. I tell clients all the time, obviously, pay your debts, but what we see that's even more important is that may trigger well, hang on, I'm 30 days late. I'm not 60 or 90 or 120. And the later you are, the worse your score becomes, the more expensive being a consumer becomes. So those letters are very important. I don't want to shortchange that, but equally as important is making sure what's being reported is accurate. Because I have to tell you, if you're 120 days late and it says 120 days late, that's accurate. There's nothing we can do about that.
And that's what's going to be could be put on your report
for 7 years.
For 7 years, that's a long
time.
Whitney, what about those situations? And I don't want to get too deep into the finances and how to budget your money.
Sure.
But let's say that you're having a hard time making your credit card payments or paying down on your line. That you owe the credit card company, and they say, all right, here's a minimum that each month you owe $158 as your minimum payment. And what if you're only paying like $75 a month?
A lot of times, because of a lot of the laws in place, you can contact these companies, and most of the time we found they'll work with you. Now there are some outliers and some bad apples, etc.
Sure.
But most of the time, if you're saying, look, I just lost my job, something bad has happened, I've been hurt on the job, whatever, my income's down, I can only pay a certain amount. Many times they'll work with you. But what we're more, concerned about, and what bothers us the most is when the companies just flat get it wrong, and it hurts people.
And that's why you need to be proactive in looking at your report each year.
If you can. And let me tell you how to do that. You go to www.annualcreditreport.com.
Okay.
Not free credit report. That's something you pay for on TV.
Sure.
Annualcreditreport.com, and you can get your report from all 3 bureaus. There was a law, the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act, FACTA, that was passed a few years ago, and Congress said credit reporting agencies give everybody a free credit report every 12 months. Unfortunately, so few people take advantage of it. I read some statistics, like 50 or 60% of reports had errors in them. That's scary.
I suspect some of the mentality for the average person who may have some suspect issues in their past, they take the head in the sand approach and hoping that if they don't look at it, it'll go away. When in fact, I assume it just gets worse.
It gets worse. It does. But also, too, if one agency is reporting something bad, the other 2 may not be, and you'd want to see that. Or sometimes what's worse is you may think, well, I have terrible credit. I filed bankruptcy 5 years ago. It's just messed up beyond all recognition. Look at it anyway. You'd be surprised at what just removing a couple of trade lines will do to increase your score.
Okay.
See it all the time.
Guys, thank you for tuning in with us. Good morning, Steve. Hope you're doing well. I've got Whitney Seals here, a buddy of mine who is a fantastic attorney. He has really developed an area of the law that he has specializes in, and it deals with credit reports. It deals with all types of online accounts and your identity and those types of things. If you guys have any questions for Whitney while we're live, please put them in the comment section, or even if you're watching this later on, just throw them in there. We'll make sure that Whitney sees those questions and can answer them. Also, when we get finished, Whitney will put the online credit bureau's information, contact information on how to go look up your reports, and we'll put in information about how to get in touch with Whitney, because you may have questions after seeing this. You may not even realize you've got those questions until you start looking at your online file. Whitney, I want to share with you the fact that at least 3 times now in the last decade, I've been subject to identity theft. I've had twice now my tax returns or tax returns filed using my Social Security number, but it was not my return either time. In fact, I'm dealing with it right now. and we're now almost 4 months later, and I'm still answering questions for not only the IRS but for the state, making
Right.
sure, answer this, answer this. How can a person deal with those things on the front end? How do you? We want to. I know you can only do so much, but what are some tips? What are some things the average consumer can
Sure.
do?
Well, there are some products out there, and I'm certainly not endorsing one over the other. Let me be clear about that. But there are identity lock programs, various things that you can do on the paid end. However, on the free end, under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you can put a lock on your credit report. If you notice, hey, someone took out a credit card account that doesn't belong to me, they will lock it down to the point where if you legitimately go get credit, you have to present various forms of identification. Sometimes they'll give you a PIN, those kinds of things. But it puts whoever is looking at their credit report on notice, say some car dealership out of town that is not you, to use extra care.
Sure.
And that's important, obviously.
I didn't realize I had been paying for DirecTV in Puerto Rico for about 2 years. Even though we had it was the 7-year, I forget exactly what it was. It was a watch on it, and it slipped by even that.
Well, again, I'm going to go back to look at your credit report just to be careful, make sure what's going on, and you'd be surprised sometimes what you find. I've got a case right now that I'm litigating over in Mississippi where a woman was marked as deceased and cannot obtain any sort of credit whatsoever, to the point where she will call in tears and say, I went to my bank and they know me and they won't help me out even though I'm very much alive and talked to, because that's how important credit report is and how much credence it gets.
Well, that's what's going to lead me to this part of the questions for you is, when people ultimately come to you and they have a case that you evaluate, we're now, I'm not going to call it extreme, but we're at the far end of problems for people.
Correct.
So now it then takes an experienced lawyer like yourself to figure all this out.
Right.
So without obviously disclosing client communications or issues, what are some of those situations that now require a lawyer to get involved?
Well, I want to talk about that. Before we get there, one thing that's important to note that I think we need to talk about is that if you find an inaccuracy on the credit report, there's a MasterCard that you've never heard of.
Sure.
You have to dispute it with the credit reporting agency. You can contact MasterCard themselves, but that doesn't really trigger anything. The way this works, and then we'll talk about some specific situations, is let's say I have that hypothetical MasterCard on my credit report I don't owe, and it says it's delinquent and it's bad and whatnot.
Right.
I write to the credit reporting agencies, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, and say, I don't own this. This isn't my debt. Take it off. At that point, they are required to do an investigation. Now, an investigation is supposed to involve a meaningful, I guess, digging deeper, so to speak.
Right.
Unfortunately, what usually happens is one computer talks to a computer at MasterCard and says, is this Whitney Seals? Yes, it is. Does he live in Birmingham? He sure does. Okay, then you owe it. Well, at that point, people typically come to see me. And at that point, this is what we do. There are two types of liability here. You can either go after MasterCard for reporting bad info, but also you can go after the credit reporting agencies for not doing a good investigation. That's where most of the cases wind up. Some of the crazy ones we've had, the deceased person, I am proud. I'm going to toot my horn for a minute. I tried one 2 months ago with a young gentleman who had disputed something, and the credit reporting agency said, not only are we not going to investigate, we don't even believe it's you that wrote us the letter, which was surprising to him, obviously.
Sure.
We filed suit, tried the case, and he wound up getting over a $3 million verdict in the case. So the cases have value in as much as all of us as citizens have dealt with the hassles, frustrations, pulling out of the hair, just trying to get something done. And once you get stuck in the bureaucracy of the credit reporting agencies, unfortunately, you do need a lawyer to help most of the time. They're not just going to take it off because they believe you.
It sounds like the worst thing you can do is just ignore it.
Well, that's what they're counting on.
And
they're hoping you just let it go.
So it just takes being a little proactive, picking up the phone and calling Whitney Seals, finding out what your options are. Go online. I'm sure there's several websites that I don't know if they're paid or free that can probably get you started on the process.
Right.
But Whitney, it just seems like that, like with anything in life, if you ignore it, it's not going to go away.
No, no. And I'll say this too as a small plug. We have free consultations. If you have something you're concerned about, I pride myself on being able to tell you good, bad, or ugly.
Sure.
In short order, so you can make decisions that help you or get you where you're going. And I'll say this too, this is a little bit of a crusade for me. I don't really come from a lot, and my parents growing up had innumerable credit issues, and so I know firsthand how devastating it can be on a family, sometimes through no fault of anybody's. But what you can't do is just give up and be hopeless and say, all right, I've written to Equifax, they won't write me back, or they're not helping me, so I guess there's just nothing I can do. Wrong. There is absolutely something you can do.
There's a lot you can do. And guys, thank you for tuning in today for a little bit with my buddy Whitney Seals with Cochrun Seals Law Firm. Even though Whitney's based in Birmingham, his cases aren't based in Birmingham.
No.
He's statewide, and in fact, you go to other states
Definitely.
For these types of cases.
Nationwide.
If you've got questions, if you've got concerns, dump them in the comment section for Whitney. We'll make sure that he gets them. We'll put Whitney's contact information in here. Whitney, before we get finished, I wanted to find out from you if a person really gets to the point where they feel like they need to call an attorney and they consult with you, and then you decide there's a case to pursue.
Right.
Ultimately, what type of damages can a person pursue in these cases?
The damages you can get are varied. The first damage or area of damages you can get are credit damages. Are you paying 2 points higher on your mortgage than you should be?
Right.
That can add up in a hurry.
Very quickly.
Also, mental anguish and emotional distress damages. And don't give those short shrift. This can be incredibly destructive to a person's psyche. You can't get a job because your credit's sunk. You can't get an apartment. You deal with it day in and day out. They're not listening to you. You write to them. Essentially, they tell you you're full of it. That these are difficult things, and this is something that we focus on. But finally, too, and this is importantly, if you have a successful action, they have to pay your attorney's fees. Now, I want to repeat that. If you have a successful action, they pay your attorney's fees. That's a good mechanism that Congress put in place to encourage people to please act as a private attorney general. U.S. government can't police all these untold millions of credit transactions and reports, so look at it yourself, and if you find a lawyer that will help you, we'll make sure that person gets paid out of the wrongdoer's pocket and not yours.
So it's your investment is your time.
Exactly.
And being proactive, coming to somebody like Whitney, having your reports there, showing him the issues, the problems that you've had. Maybe you've already been dealing with the credit reporting companies or the credit card companies, whoever it may be, and you're just frustrated, you're getting to a point where you're ready for a professional. That's when you come and see Whitney.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said, it doesn't cost anything to give me a call and talk to me.
Well, Whitney, this is invaluable stuff, and I really appreciate your few minutes sharing your expertise with everybody. Guys, we'll conclude this week's episode of NOMBERG Law Live. You've been with Whitney Seals with Cochrun Seals Law Firm in Birmingham. Whitney has just educated us on how to deal with your credit reports, your credit agency issues, IRS problems, whatever it may be. This is the man to come see. Thank you, Whitney. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Miller. Thank you for having me.
Guys, come see us next Tuesday with another episode of NOMBERG Law Live, as we always are on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. We'll put all in the comment section, all the information you need to be able to get in touch with Whitney and the credit reporting agencies. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next week.
And get your credit report.
That's right.